I'm going to answer live the one question in the question box that asks if the event will be recorded. And just so that people know that this event is being recorded, and it's streaming live on Facebook at the Loss and Health Research Institute webpage on Facebook. So those of you here now can see that name for the Loss and Health Research Institute, which is the research arm of the London hospitals. And this is currently streaming live on that site. After the end of the event, a taped copy will be available on that Facebook page. And I know we've got a lot of community partners as well that are very excited about today. So just so that you're aware that you can go to that, you can share that with your friends and your networks. I know not everyone can be here right now, but you still will have that opportunity. So thanks for that absolute great question. And we're going to start in about 2 minutes. I see the numbers increasing on the people joining us right now. We'll be starting momentarily. We just have the front slide up. We'll put this at the end as well, in that our publishers have generously offered a 20% discount over the next couple days in celebration. I should say as well, the other thing that they're doing is we'll be sending a list of all attendees, and there's going to be a draw for a couple of free copies of the book. So that will also be a bonus for participating today. Okay, so we're starting the recording now, just so everyone's aware. And right on the second for 10 o'clock, we're a prompt group. So welcome everybody to this event. We're very happy to have this launch event in recognition of the book entitled Poverty, Mental Health, and Social Inclusion. But also, we very much see this as a celebration of the CURA, or Community University Research Alliance, that it was based on. And as such, we really see this as a community celebration as well. And I'll be getting more to that in a minute. So just a quick highlight of the agenda here. We're going to have a few introductions. We're already starting that. You're going to be hearing from a few of us during this period. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the CURA, as is Betty Edwards. Myself, Cheryl Forchuk, as the academic director of the project, and Betty Edwards as the community director. Then more talking about the book itself, although all of us are going to be a bit talking about the book. Rick is going to really focus on that. And then one of the really exciting things about this book was, there was actually many things, but one of them was our focus on solutions, because we could have a book talking about poverty and social exclusion and homelessness and have a big research study and say it's horrible. But you know what? I think we all know it's horrible. I think what's more important is to come up with solutions. So we have examples of some of those solutions. And the other piece of that is that it includes some photojournalism with work done by Justin Langille, who went to these different examples of solutions and talk to people with lived experience about what did they think was important that needed to be captured. And the book contains many of these photos, and you're going to see some of those photos and hear from our community agencies. There's then going to be a question and answer period, and that will also be primarily dealt with through the Q&A that you see on the bottom. Because of the number of people participating today, that's going to be easier than having numerous people speaking at once. And we'll review that when we get there. I know we do have some media attending today, and there will be an opportunity after for media interviews. You could also be asking questions in the question period. Next slide. So I'll just briefly introduce Courtney Hillier, who is one of my very busy research staff, who is going to do the land acknowledgement. So over to you, Courtney.
Thank you, Cheryl. Lawson Health Research Institute and our partners are situated on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Wendat, and Attawandaron peoples who have long-standing relationships to the land and region of southwestern Ontario and the City of London. The local First Nations communities of this area include Chippewa of the Thames, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We acknowledge both the historical and ongoing injustices faced by Indigenous peoples in Canada and commit to actively listening to, learning from, and building relationships with our Indigenous allies. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations peoples and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island, North America. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Courtney. And just to introduce myself further, I'm also an assistant scientific director at Lawson Health Research with the School of Nursing and Department of Psychiatry at Western, and the research chair, the Ivy Research Chair at Parkwood Institute Research. And to understand where we're coming from with the book is to understand what we were doing with the CURA, the Community University Research Alliance. And one of the things that's important to understand, this was actually our second CURA. Our first one was on housing, homelessness, and mental health. And we also have a book through Canadian Scholars Press that was earlier published on this. So this builds on that previous work. The CURA built on the previous CURA. And we really wanted to better understand those interrelationships between poverty, social inclusion, and psychiatric survivors. And as mentioned, this idea of community-based initiatives was very much in the forefront. We wanted to ensure that by doing this, that psychiatric survivors had a strong voice in this process. And I thank Betty, who will be coming up next, for really providing strong leadership in that direction, and a lot of support for people. And we wanted to come up with concrete data as well. So often our community partners would say, we know what the problems are, we know we have an idea about some of the solutions, but we don't have data to back that up, and we don't have proper evaluations to demonstrate what's working or not working. So in many ways, this was so truly a partnership, and so truly a collaborative effort. I just can't overemphasize it. I know Betty's going to delve into that in even more detail. I want to point out the years of the actual cura, and I'm sure everybody can figure out the math that finished 5 years ago, but the work did not finish 5 years ago. Through the work of both of these curas, we really laid down a strong foundation for future projects, and we've had many projects that continued after that. When you look at the book itself, many of the solutions and many of the chapters involve work that happened past that 2016 date. And that is, and even when you look at some of our recent research announcements, such as having youth-specific strategies to address the issue of preventing discharge to homelessness, which was certainly identified through our curas and what you see, or our issues of the problems of data that we recently had an announcement from the Public Health Agency of Canada, where we're now going to be looking at how do we know throughout the country how many people are actually homeless, so that we can better evaluate not only who needs specific programming, specific needs, what programs are needed where, but then also to better evaluate. Does this actually make, do we actually reduce the number of people who are homeless by having a particular strategy? And a lot of what we did was take on looking at subpopulations and coming up with community-based solutions. So the volume of work, because it was both the cura and post-cura, we had enough material for 3 books, and it was a lot of work and discussions with many people to try to narrow that down. And I think the only way we did it, Rick and I both managed to coordinate our sabbaticals to get that down, to tighten up some of the chapters, and to have as many chapters as we could to represent the diversity. One of the things with this work is many of the chapters were previously published, but because we have such a broad spectrum of participants, they were published in very different areas, like some in health, some in more social services, urban studies, geography, journals focusing on publication. So there are, poverty. So it was so broad. We felt it was important for this book as well as the other to pull it together to tell more of a complete picture. And I also very much see this as a celebration of the community work that we have done in London and the multiple solutions that we have come up with and tested that we hope will also be a way forward for other communities to look at, and have hope that despite the difficult problems that are involved, that we can solve problems when we work together and cross sectors. And I'm going to pass on now to Betty Edwards. Betty Edwards, as I mentioned, was the community director for this cura during that period. She's also the executive director of Can Voice, which is a consumer survivor organization. And Can Voice was so involved in this process. So I really thank Betty for being here today, and we'll go on to Betty now.
Thank you, Cheryl. It was my pleasure to be part of this project. A huge learning curve for me, but it really was wonderful to, as you can see, understand and embrace the complexity of our learning. What stands out for me was that we were able to have not only in the book about social inclusion, in our committee structure, we had social inclusion. We had our executive committee, you can see in the middle of this diagram, we met every Monday. I mean, that was just our routine. That was Cheryl and I with some of the students, the people that really were the glue, met every Monday. And then once a month, these meetings that are around the circle, we met and talked about what was happening with the research, what was happening with policy and ethics. What was wonderful was that anyone who wanted to be part of these various committees was able to be part of that, and whatever level they were coming in at. That was really a gift. So for the curriculum, some of them were actually the students, some were the professors, some were the teachers. so that there could be a change in how change was going to happen. For the forum, every year we provided through the Cura a free conference in London, and people came from all the different places around Ontario, but also from BC, so that we could meet and share where we were up to that point in our understanding of the different issues and the solutions. It was awesome to meet and grow and then meet after for kind of the, okay, what was the next step? And that was awesome. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next slide. All of these people, and it's interesting looking back 5 years later at who all sat around the tables. We didn't have to do Zoom back then, thank goodness. But we met around the tables at various locations in London, and this table of this list of people grew each time we met almost. From being just, I'm going to say 15 to 20 to 30 or more different community partners. What was wonderful was getting an understanding for them of who they were and what they provided, and for them to understand us, but also their members. I think one of the biggest difference from the two curas was the first cura we took different people. The second one, it was the same people, following up with them. And then we noticed the people that had died. We didn't catch that in the first cura. I'm going to go to the next slide. As I said, there were people from all over. So we had people from Simon Fraser University. We had a fellow from the United States who was the father of, I believe it's social development. We had people from everywhere. And when we did the Cura presentations, we went to British Columbia and met with people all over doing other Curas, and talked about the work we were doing here in London. And we went to Newfoundland, we went to Ottawa, we talked about what that felt like, what it looked like. And the last slide. We worked together. And I think that was a wonderful gift of this Cura. No one felt outside. No one felt less than. And even it was interesting, learning the language that we all needed to hear from each other and embrace. What was also a gift was seeing the academics and the students and the people with lived experience. I remember one annual forum having someone from the street actually come and speak, and how much he touched some of the people that sat in on his presentation. There was a lot of understanding and care and learning done because of this Cura, and I'm very grateful it happened. Thanks.
So we'll on to Rick Chernick from King's, and I'll let you have any further introductions there, Rick.
I'm Rick Chernick from the School of Social Work, and I too am a proud member of this group that accomplished so many things. Academics, maybe because our books really don't sell in large numbers, often call our writing labors of love. For the contributors to poverty, mental health, and social inclusion, it really was a labor of respect. The book examines empirically, both quantitatively and qualitatively, but most importantly, humanly and with respect. Is a group that's typically overlooked and ignored in our society, is generally invisible. And even more so now during the extraordinary times we're all experiencing together during the pandemic. The large team that contributed this book, led by Dr. Forchuk's vision, consisted of mental health consumer survivors, community practitioners, not-for-profit organizations, United Way agencies, municipal governments, and because at heart, as an academic endeavor, a range of academics from different disciplines. How substantive and far-reaching the issue is can be seen by examining the background of the contributors. On your screen, you see the list of all the different disciplines that contribute to it. There's 59 authors in this book, representing 19 different academic backgrounds, which speaks to how broad and encompassing the issues of poverty, mental health, and social exclusion really is. The range of voices that contributed to this edited book also speaks to various academic disciplines, right? And you'll see the fact that there was law and health promotion and social work and nursing and things you wouldn't expect, business administration, theology, demography. The impact and the range, the importance of this topic really extends to all aspects of our society. The 59 contributors to the cut down version of 20 chapters that you'll see in the book modeled the need for cooperation and integrated thinking to address this type of complex issue, with a goal of not just documenting the lived realities of those experiencing poverty and mental health, with a goal of creating solutions. However, we're just members of the community, ivory tower scholars, mental health consumer survivors, social justice advocates, and dare I say, social justice warriors. And as such, our writing doesn't have a solution to resolve poverty or mental health. When the first is such a broad societal issue, the second, biopsychosocial phenomenon that's global. But what the research and the writing you'll find in the book does do is document the intersection and interplay of these issues. And again, the goal was always to offer solutions for social inclusion, to make these invisible members of our community be seen and have a voice to be heard. When we began the research, the idea of social inclusion was of course important. I mean, there was thousands of hours that went into research and the writing and the editing of the book. But when we were doing this, it never occurred to us that a little thing called COVID-19 would come along in the middle of it all. Now, after 15 months of social isolation that we've all experienced collectively, yet alone, away from our loved ones and our tolerated ones, from our friends, from our colleagues, from our teammates, from my son who lives in the United States, I've not hugged for 17 months. My other son who lives down the road, haven't been in the same room for 5 months. We all now have this sense of what, for a very brief period of time, not be socially connected is like. And I think that allows us to appreciate in a much more personal manner what a lifetime of social exclusion might feel like and what the impact is upon us on multiple levels. The writing of the book is extremely high academic standards, and I can say that without bias, not just because I'm the co-editor and wrote some of the chapters, but you can see from the slide on you that we have touched upon a variety of different ideas. I mean, it's an academic book, right? So there's academic chapters in there for you. Service preferences of homeless youth with mental health issues, housing first, treatment first, or both together. Really good, solid science. Engaging individuals, asking them good sample sizes. So what makes knowledge in contemporary society? But there's also innovative chapters, outside the box thinking, like iris scanning, a solution to the lost identification problem encountered by people experiencing homelessness. A solution-focused book has to have practical chapters, and there are several of those in there for you to read, such as the effectiveness of a shelter diversion intervention for families who experience homelessness, or preventing mental illness discharge to homelessness, large social problems that affect communities, not just in London, but across Canada. I mean, there's fundamental chapters that get to the core of this issue, such as creating social exclusion, the disconnection between housing, income support, and mental health policies. And finally, new and unique insights, such as playing musical chairs, understanding how to end homelessness. This isn't the easiest book in the world to read, but it's one by offering solutions to a complex issue will educate you, it'll make you think, and really, that's the ultimate goal of any book arising from a community-university partnership. But the other wonderful thing that arose from this was the community partnership we've talked about. And we are very privileged to have some of our contributors here. But because everyone couldn't come, we've put together a series of video clips for you. I just want to introduce some of the speakers you'll be hearing. Bev and Michelle, who I'll introduce in just a moment, are here with us, and they'll be more than willing to answer your questions or talk about their experiences at the end of the presentation. You're about to see a video highlighting 4 of our major contributors. Justice Langille is a Guelph, Ontario-based visual artist. He explores rapidly changing human relationships with the Canadian environment. He's influenced by environmental anthropology and contemporary news media productions. We're privileged to have Justin. He's been featured in the Globe and Mail, The Walrus, among other publications. Bev Colby started out with Goodwill Industries in 2008, so she's been in this field a long time. She's a vocational counselor, supporting job seekers with disabilities to connect to meaningful employment Then she moved on to be Director of Innovative and Vocational Services, with a focus on ODSP and OW, developmental service programs, and currently she's a Director of Mission Advancement, overseeing all the mission impact initiatives through Goodwill Industries. Justin Dimitoff is Operations Lead of Impact Junk Solutions, a social enterprise program that arose from the Canadian Mental Health Association in Middlesex. And finally, Michelle Solomon will be speaking to you. She's a registered nurse and PhD candidate. She held a range of positions and comes from a very distinct standpoint. She's at the Arthur Labatt Family School of Nursing. She's a previous founder and executive director of Connect for Mental Health and is currently studying the psychosocial factors in youth living with bipolar disorder. Look forward to sharing our photojournalism with you now.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're all well as possible amidst the ongoing struggles of the pandemic. My name is Justin Langille. I'm a visual artist based in Guelph, soon to be in London, Ontario, whose work examines people's relationships with the environment in Canada today. However, from 2012 to 2015, I lived in London and I worked closely with Cheryl and her Cura team to document the unique research they were developing. Before I met Cheryl in 2013, I had been doing frontline housing first work in Vancouver and outreach work in London with the London Cares team in tandem with the photography I was pursuing. During this project with Cura, Cheryl, her team, and the communities she developed her research with, I stepped back from frontline work myself, supporting Housing First initiatives in London to create these photographs that will communicate the significance of employment and peer support in maintaining people's larger mental health and housing stability. I spent months on the job with employees from Impact Junk Solutions and workers in Goodwill's St. Thomas Employment Project to document their participation in employment projects that innovated new opportunities for them in the job market, as well as their wellness. During this time, I also regularly attended Connect program meetings at CMHA to document the influence of peer support on individuals' recoveries from mental illness. The result was 3 distinct archives of documentary photography that visualized Cura research through shifts at work, home time, and the support of peers. There is a palpable sense of agency in the labor and the personal work of recovery that people are engaged in the images. An element that I think separates these images in our Cura archive from other popular photographic representations of mental illness and poverty in Canada. These images and the research they accompany show us that change isn't a distant goal to be had, but something in the businesses, homes, and the streets and the places around us happening all the time. It's been an honor to contribute photography to Dr. Forchuk's Cure project and the profound work that it has done to develop new insights into solutions to poverty and homelessness in Canada. Congratulations, Rick, Cheryl, and everyone who worked on this publication. Congratulations and thank you to everyone who shared their lives with me to create these images. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you for the launch, but I hope you all enjoy yourselves and have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Collaborating as a partner in our Transitional Employment Initiative was a wonderful opportunity for Goodwill to demonstrate our mission, the power of work, and connect people living with chronic mental illness to meaningful employment. Our role at Goodwill was to leverage our work platforms in our social enterprise, introduce participants to a real work environment, a real paycheck, and layer in those wraparound supports needed as they transitioned out from vocational programs within the institutions. So our team, along with CMHA Elgin and Leeds Employment, provided training in the hard technical skills of the job, the essential soft skills, and over the course of a number of months, workers were able to condition physically and emotionally with job coaching supports on the work platform and ongoing support from their mental health care providers. It was very rewarding to see workers transition into competitive employment in Goodwill or out in the community. And we're happy to share that some continue to be employed today.
Impact Junk Solutions, as a social enterprise program with CMHA Middlesex, creates employment opportunities for community members with barriers to work. Impact hires, trains, and ensures individuals with mental health concerns to work in our community junk removal and cleaning and disinfecting businesses.
Connect for Mental Health facilitated a 6-week peer-run recovery group that followed the Your Recovery Journey program created by the Schizophrenia Society of Canada. The program was created with the belief that people living with mental illness can get well and stay well. It was designed for individuals to obtain knowledge and tools to meet their personal recovery goals. Through dialogue, reflection, and activities, we explore the program's topics of recovering quality of life, self-esteem and positive self-talk, healthy relationships and peer support, medication and mindfulness, and worked through an introduction to Wellness Recovery Action Planning, or WRAP, a self-designed prevention and wellness process developed by Mary Ellen Copeland, where individuals explore wellness tools, identify when things aren't going so well, and making a plan to be proactive in preventing relapse.
Hi, everybody.
So thank you all. I think when we were looking at this before as a group, we all agreed this really brought back some wonderful memories at the time. And I think the pictures and the examples in the book are fantastic. So we're now going to have a moderated question period. So I would suggest that you open the Q&A chat window at the bottom to put your questions in there. If possible, direct who you would like to answer the question, and to be aware that Courtney, who you've heard from earlier, as well as Amanda Wright, who was for much of the Cura was our research coordinator for this project, will be looking over those questions and directing them to members of the panel.
So we have from Sonia here. Thank you for foregrounding the social determinants of mental health. Curious about your work to balance the biological, medical, and social for the field, challenges, hopes, and where this book and solutions you highlight land within the tensions.
That sounds like a Rick and Cheryl question. And I would say that, like, our funding was from the Social Sciences and Humanities Council Canada, and was one of the things that, even to get that funding, was the agreement that we would be focusing primarily on social sciences. I think in mental health, there certainly has been a lot of work done on the physical, the biological, and those aspects are also very important. Mental health is one of those things that on all systems level, whether you're looking at the neurotransmitter up to the societal level, there are important factors, but we really focus more on the larger systems level in this book. Rick, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you. The bio is what's well funded, and the bio is easy, right? Because the bio blames individuals for the situations, and so as you saw from the individuals that were involved in this, it is and I hate to be a social worker, but it's a structural issue. It's a societal issue. I mean, there's no issue of visibility and invisibility. That's the whole notion of social inclusion. And so certainly by the partners we brought on, you have to acknowledge the biological piece, but that doesn't solve any problems. I mean, giving someone drugs for their lifetime doesn't make them involved in the community, doesn't give them a job. It's all these agencies coming together, and it's the data indicating that by being involved, things change. So certainly we acknowledge the bio piece, and we also acknowledge the fact the bio piece is individualizing and blaming. And by developing these networks and communities, we basically saw the whole person. And that's where community partners came in by doing the tasks and doing the hard work of providing the social supports, providing the education, providing the opportunity to become socially included. And the project provide the data to demonstrate this is the change that really matters. So yeah, start with the bio, but really is the cycle, but even more the social that makes the differences in society.
Yeah. I bet you, Betty, are you dying to say something?
I'm just appreciating that we needed to look beyond only the biology. What came to mind just as people were speaking was the whole idea of stigma And, you know, before we, or kind of in between doing these two curas, there was this whole thing about submitting one of the articles to a journal on stigma. And they said, well, there is no stigma. And it was like,
Yeah, we
how
saw.
how many times do we have to see and hear from the people that we talk to, the damage that's been done? And again, it's across every level of a person's life. It's not just their biology. Thanks.
Yeah, I should say too, as a nurse being funded by SSHRC, they used to have what they euphemistically referred to as the No Health Committee. So at sometimes I was asked by leadership, how are we supposed to justify funding a nurse with SSHRC funding? And my answer was always, because a nurse can still do social science research. But certainly, you know, there, as Rick says, there's lots of funding for the biological. It's not to say that that isn't also important, but that was not the focus here.
Okay, so we have another question from Alexander. So this is a two-part question. So the first one is, can you provide some examples of challenges that you investigated for specific groups, some solutions that you're recommending to address the challenges? And Alexander is a professor at Humber College. So they want to specifically ask about questions and questions about students.
Yep.
So any
Yeah.
challenges around students.
I'm going to have Rick answer the student question, because he was took a leadership on, in fact, co-chaired the student and curriculum committee, but I'll take the question on subpopulations. So one of the big issues is the very many subpopulations. So if you look at the book, for example, we did some work looking at homeless veterans. And when we talked to veterans about their journey of homelessness, and what they felt would work, we did that initially qualitatively, and then developed a model based on what they were saying. The first study we did was actually the first study in Canada related to homeless veterans. We primarily had literature from the US and a few other countries. The solutions that they came up with was, unlike the American literature, which focused on PTSD, that they felt that the CAF was largely the issue of alcohol being part of the military culture, and that instead of 18 months or 6 months after discharges in the American literature, it was often 10 years later, and it was related to alcoholism, and that what they needed was harm reduction. They needed housing first, but they also needed a different kind of peer support, someone that understood the systems navigation between the homeless culture and the military culture, because they felt that that was very much a culture clash. We demonstrate that in 4 cities: London, Toronto, Calgary, and Victoria. A lot of that has now been taken up by the national guidelines with FAC on how to address veteran homelessness. London was the first city in Canada to have zero functional veteran homelessness, which was not just our work and that early understanding. They've also built in a whole bunch of extra pieces to that with further refinement over the years. So that's one example. At the same time we were doing that, opposite. Oh yeah, and the veterans liked a lot of structure because of that military culture. They don't want you to be 30 seconds or 1 minute late. Youth, and Amanda was involved with that project as well. We looked at homeless youth as another example. They actually found that many of the services had too much structure. A lot of the traditional housing first really offers both housing and treatment, and youth felt that they needed to focus on one at a time, but that they would move very rapidly between them. So again, there's a chapter that talks about that. There's other chapters in terms of families, in terms of preventing discharge from hospital to homelessness, et cetera, but we don't have time to go over all of them, but those are 2 kind of examples that gave opposite suggestions about what they wanted. The youth as well, though, wanted peer support, but what they wanted was a slightly older person who had left homelessness for their peer support. Rick can talk about the students.
Yeah, with regard to students, I mean, the entire project was principled on a participatory action research philosophy. So we came in not as knowers, but as facilitators. And that was true for the community partnerships and likewise the students. Students were given opportunities to literally engage in every element of the project, from data collection, data analysis, contributing to papers. So the notion is providing mentorship to students through the entire process, supporting them. And in the cases of some of our students, they went on to do graduate work and doctoral work in the area. So participatory action research, right? You're involved in every element. You get a voice in every element. Your voice is valued. And that, of course, was modeled on how we involved the consumer survivors. The sort of culmination is we did a participatory action debrief at the end of it all, asked them what they could learn. This chapter isn't in the book, this article is not in the book, but asked what they learned, asked them how we could do better. And so the notion of, and again, as someone that's had research assistants for a quarter century, not grunt work, not doing just the petty background work, but actual involvement so that your contributors as a new insight, as new eyes into the project, and what do you contribute to it? So yeah, valuing voice, giving opportunity to contribute, and acknowledging the importance of different perspectives from young learners and new members of our fields.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, Rick, I was just remembering Michelle actually was a student in this process. She comes with numerous hats, being a registered nurse, a consumer survivor, and has also been a student. So I didn't know if you might want to add something about the student role as well, Michelle. You're on mute.
Well, as a student, I was a nursing student, so I understood, the role, social determinants of health, and having a holistic approach on mental health. And I was also one of the, facilitators of the recovery group, where we're looking at peer support solutions. So I found that there were a lot of students struggling with mental health issues during their schooling, and having an outlet to talk about their mental health and how they cope, and the different topics we addressed in the recovery group were really helpful. But I do also think there's still work to do in supporting students socially with their mental health and going through school and whatnot. But I think as a nursing student, I had that additional lens of understanding the importance of getting together as peers, and having even the wanting to talk about mental health for myself. And I think that was definitely needed in the student population, was a bit of that type of leadership. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Cheryl, just a comment. I know one thing that I was thinking about today was the law students that got involved with this project, particularly at the policy level, taking a look at the ODSP, how the whole thing was written up. And then one of the students that began early in the project wanted to run the next year's team, and just the follow-up for 2 or 3 years with that one student, and their real engagement with us, and then the feedback back to that part of the university.
Yeah, that's a great example, because because it wasn't just nursing students and social work students, but as Rick had, that's like, and the law students were particularly important to look at those policies and laws.
That's kind of great that you brought that up, because we have a question from Elaine here that says, my wonder is if anyone is addressing the exclusion, poverty, discrimination in our federal laws and legislation.
We didn't talk, like we haven't solved that problem, I could say. We did a bit more work on the provincial level than the federal level, but I agree it's a bigger problem. In the first CURA, we did have representatives from federal, provincial, and municipal government. Like our policy committee, we tried to have elected officials or staff from the various levels of government. Betty showed you that slide. We had a number of issues. We worked with, for example, ODSP. With the first Cura, we were able to change some policies there. We've had with some of our later work, we've identified issues such as the assistive device legislation in Ontario, which I think some of you may be aware of. But I don't think we've gone as far with the federal legislation. Although, as I say, we did have people from the various levels participating, and certainly the municipal level, we had a very high amount of policy decisions happening at the municipal level. The City of London has been a fantastic partner. They funded some of our little pilot projects that would have been hard getting funding for, and really we're very rapid in taking some of the evidence-based solutions and then very quickly addressing that at the municipal level. So a lot at the municipal level, a little bit at the provincial level, not so much at the federal level.
Yeah, for the most part, the individuals we're working with were either recipients of OW or ODSP before they became employed. And so those policies were at the provincial level that were our primary engagement.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have a question from Grace. She's just asking if there's any sexual abuse survivors that were included in Cura.
Oh, what a wonderful question. When we had our first Cura, and we sat around, it was the consumer survivors that said, you must ask questions about early childhood sexual abuse and trauma. And so that was a big focus of Cura 1. And we were so grateful to that suggestion. We used the early childhood trauma and abuse scale that had 4 levels, 4 types of trauma in terms of physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. I'm missing one. What am I missing, Rick or Amanda? Anyway, they have the four levels. Oh, emotional abuse, I'm missing. We didn't find anyone who was homeless that did not rate high on at least one of those subscales. And we certainly found the vast majority of people as a whole that had been diagnosed with mental health illness, that this was a huge issue. So we've had many papers on that topic. Many of our grad students took on pieces of that. We did have some of that in the Cura 1 book. We did not explicitly pull that out as a separate chapter or anything in the second book because we had talked about it, but we do have a number of published papers on that topic. The other super interesting thing, we had a bit of pushback from ethics when we went to do this because we were interviewing highly vulnerable people. And they felt it would be very triggering and that because of the people might be isolated, that we had to have something in place that if people felt discomfort and needed to follow up with us after, that we had to have a process in place for us to contact them back. And keep in mind, we had in that first Cura where we did that, we had 1,500 interviews. Not one person called us back because of that scale and said that they were uncomfortable, which we were really surprised by. The thing that surprised us even more was that we did have calls back about the interview, and what people called us back about, we had a form called the Housing Preference Form that looked at where you are now and where you would like to be. There's often a myth out there that people who are homeless because they want to. We would find maybe 2 to 3% would say they wanted to be homeless. Some years we had every single person who said that call us back and say, you know what, I was really disturbed by that question. I said I wanted to be homeless, but as I thought about it, it's truly because I have no other choice. And I feel really bad that I gave you that answer because it's not true. I would love to not be homeless, but I just don't see another option, another choice that I could actually materialize. So interestingly, although the sensitivity of this, the sexual abuse, where people at the interviews were just, thank heavens you asked me that. I'm so glad you asked me that. And many people said as well, they had not been asked that question before, even though they'd been in treatment. So super important, but also important that we found that the most sensitive question is, do you actually want to be homeless?
Cheryl, one other thing was the whole idea of trauma, head
Mhm.
injuries came up with
Oh,
this.
yes, yeah.
And we hadn't really looked at that before. But just the number of individuals who had mental health issues also had the head injuries.
Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. So we're, oops, that sign was a cue that, oh no, we're still okay. We're got 13 minutes.
Sorry, that was a finger slip on my part.
I thought, whoa, where did the time go? I don't know if you might want to, I know you have the contact information on the later, even though we're still on the question period, maybe in case people want to make note of the contacts, Rick's and my email, Amanda's email, Laura, in terms of media relations, Can Voice, and then some of the other speakers, Betty at Can Voice or Justin. And the publishers. But go on with the questions. Phew, we got more time.
So we have from Adele here. As you continue your work with Cura on these topics, will you continue offering conferences for individuals and community partners? If so, how might community partners learn how to get involved?
Email us and make sure you're on our mailing list. I would say, well, it's been a real shakeup for us during COVID, and Betty and I were just talking about that a couple of days ago, because it's part of our process that we have a lot of community events for all our research projects. We usually have in-person launch events. The longer events will have these public events if we can possibly get the funding for them for the middle and certainly at the end. And we've had to shift to doing them all virtual this year. I think we can hardly wait to get people back together. I think one of the things we learned, we may likely end up with some hybrid models, because some of our larger conferences, we would certainly get people from across the country and even outside the country. But we're finding with the virtual events, we're seeing a very international group being able to join us, as well as across the country for, and often coast to coast to coast. So as difficult as it was, there are some advantages. So I think in the future, we're going to probably try to look at how do we capture some of the best of both of these options. Although they were such a community event, like our final dissemination conference for the Cura, which was 3 days. We had papers, presentations from everyone. We had people, as Betty had said, with lived experience. I remember one person who had only had 2 days in the last 5 years that they had actually been housed, submitted an abstract to the conference, and with support, had a couple PowerPoints, worked with a community agency and had some PowerPoints to say, what is it like to be homeless in London? So we had 30% of the 250 people at that conference were people with lived experience, as well as academics, and as well as students, et cetera. So it's hard to describe the momentum that does. That conference as well, we had a lot of our social enterprises were selling products at it. So we had kind of a media, we had a arts night, we had our photos were on exhibit on the top floor at Goodwill, where that was open to the public for the entire week to come in and learn about it. So it was a tremendous loss this past year to not be able to have those kind of community events, but we have had this advantage. We have very regular media events. Amanda, who is supervising, said if she ever had to be a wedding planner, she thinks she's gained all the skills. Anyway, if anyone wants to be on our list for events, I would say you can email me and I'll make sure you're added to the list. Laura as well from Lawson, who has many media events as well, can also advise people.
Keith is just wondering if there are PowerPoint presentations or any things from the conferences that are accessible.
In terms of like a lot of what's accessible is the publications that we've come out with after. I mean, we did have a report that went to SSHRC that has a lot of that info. That was a fairly long document. Amanda, do you remember how long that document was? I think it was like, it was quite long. So that is available through SSHRC. But really the most of the evidence from, and then we do have some videos, et cetera, that we took that are less publicly available. This event will be publicly available, and a lot of it really is the publications, which includes the publications in the book. But as I say, there was quite a few other publications. We couldn't, there just wasn't the space within the book to put all the publications that have come from the Cura, and certainly the subsequent themes that we've carried forward. I don't know, Amanda, you might want to speak any more to any of the information from the conferences.
Yeah, so we do have, it is on the website, some of the links to those publications.
The Poverty and Social Inclusion website?
Yeah, and we did have a Facebook page also. So yeah, I think that's where most of that information would be.
Amanda, can you put that website up in the chat group so people that might be interested in seeing know how to access it?
Let me try to find it. I know it's from Cheryl's website. I don't know if Courtney has access to that or Sarah has access to that.
Yeah. So there's that website and the Facebook one as well, where some of that material is. But I would say if we can't find it fast enough, and email Amanda or myself, and we'll get that information to you.
We have a question from Kelly. As a housing support worker in London community, I'm wondering if you found other changes or recommendations to the Housing First model being implemented in London to help better support folks experiencing homelessness and mental illness in our community.
Well, one of the really important things about Housing First is it's about individual choice and where the person is at. And I think that has to be honored. We did find that there were some variations in populations according to how they saw it, but still based on this idea, it's about individual choice. So even when you find, for example, that youth want to address one problem at a time and not deal with their mental health, addiction, and including addiction and housing simultaneously, doesn't mean that you can skip that question for youth. You still have to talk to the individual, but you should be sensitive to the issue. When we talked about Housing First for veterans, we found that in many cases, they wanted to be in proximity and link. They wanted to link to their identity as a veteran, because one of the issues with addiction, and I mentioned addiction, was the primary issue is this total loss of self-respect that often comes, and people felt that a huge source of their self-respect was the fact that they were also a veteran, and they wanted to be able, but they wanted to reclaim that label. So although it was Housing First, how that was offered had to be adjusted. I know Abe Ubstrom, myself as co-investigator, have looked at women, for example, and other subgroups. We've looked at refugees. So we do, I think we can have some things to be sensitive to in implementing some Housing First, that some subgroups, there's going to be some issues that they may be more likely to land on. But if we're really looking at the principles of harm reduction beyond that, we have to get it down to the individual, be sensitive. You know what, this person might want more structure or less structure, or to take, have a different interpretation of peer support than someone else. But we still have to ask the individual.
Yeah. As this movement evolves, its notion, and one of the interesting parts is that some people don't want to have an independent unit. They want to have a roommate. They want to live with someone else. That social support continues to be important. So the housing first, as Cheryl's indicating, needs to be individualized. So again, the traditional cookie model, we're going to have 14 people in a unit supported by one worker, is lovely as a starting point, but its notion of cultural, subgroup, individual needs is where the program needs to expand to, and the nature of the support provided is where this movement needs to grow.
Okay, so I think we have time for one last question here. So from Keith, it says, just wondering how you looked at citizen neighbor engagement in addition to the collaboration of diverse agencies, disciplines, and governments.
So I'm going to give it short shift, and then I'm going to try to think of something to ask Bev because she hasn't had a chance to say something. But I would say Jan Richardson, who was very involved in the Cura, also had responsibility for neighbors and neighborhoods was part of her portfolio. And so that was certainly part of, and she was very involved with the policy committee as well as some we had a couple of city councilors on that committee as well. So the issue of neighborhood and housing, and I think some of the support we had from the city around investing in public housing and looking at that was important, but I don't think I can give that total, other than saying that, like, I would say the main way we did that was engaging with the city, supporting the city's efforts, and where possible, looking at where we could help with evidence with the city. But Bev, I know you've been sitting there and haven't had a direct question, so I'm going to throw it to you for the last couple minutes to say whatever you want.
I think, great dialogue this morning. I think that from an employment perspective, our experience was that the community approach is what's most effective. So if you have, your consumers here, and you've got mental health supports, and you've got employers over here, that siloed approach just doesn't work. And so the community approach, really wrapping around survivors and providing everybody working together, very much collaborating, making sure that the consumer has a voice. It's similar. A work first model is very similar to housing first. It's focused on the individual, what they want, where's going to be the best fit for them, where are they going to find meaning through their work, and it's going to match their skills and their interests. So that's what I would emphasize the most. And that, one of the gaps going forward is resources for the job coaching, the ongoing support, because people with, mental health disabilities, as we all know, it's not a kind of a steady flow. There's ebbs where people just need more support, and you need to be able to respond to that and to be able to have a flexible approach that can wrap around and provide the intensive supports when it's needed, and then kind of back off and just be available when they're stable and being productive in the workplace. So community collaboration, partnerships coming together, I can't emphasize that enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think our major learning is these are wicked social problems. I don't think any one sector can solve these problems. I think, could you keep that last slide up? Thank you. I think, though, we've really demonstrated that we can chip away in meaningful ways at some of these problems through collaboration and getting past the silos, getting past it's my thing to it's our thing, and that we can have these solutions by working together. The problems are so complex, they cross over so many areas. So thank you all so much for being here today. We've put up on the final slide both books, the earlier one on homelessness, housing, and mental health, as well as the one that was just recently released that we've been talking about today. We do have the 20% off that is going on for the next couple of days. And thank you so and again, I have to at the end thank the community partners, because We have all kinds of partnerships in terms of the academics, the students, the staff, but truly I do see this as a celebration of our community partners who took time from their jobs to work together with us on solutions and creating evidence that other people can use to also create solutions in their own communities. So thank you all for joining us, and feel free to contact us after. Thanks. Bye.